When we mention clowns, people often think of funny, cheerful performers, or perhaps the famous villain from Marvel Comics. However, few know that some artworks were inspired by real events. In the 1970s, there was a self-made construction contractor from Chicago. He was an enthusiastic, kind person who loved dressing up as a clown to entertain people at children's parties or charity events. But little did anyone suspect that behind that facade was an extremely cruel soul. He became one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. His name was John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown. The story takes place in Illinois, located in the Midwest United States, Springfield as its capital. Illinois is one of the main agricultural states in the U.S., with 80% of its land used for agriculture. The land in the north and center of the state is very fertile, considered one of the best farming regions in the world. The largest city in the state is Chicago, third largest city in the U.S. after New York and Los Angeles. Located on the southern shore of Lake Michigan, the developed economy, Chicago is home to over 2 million people. The main character of the story, John Wayne Gacy, was born in Chicago in March 1942. His father was an auto mechanic, and his mother was a homemaker. He was the second child in the family, with an older sister and a younger sister. His grandparents were immigrants from Poland to the United States. Gacy had Polish and Danish ancestry. His family was Catholic. Gacy's childhood was marked by overeating and little exercise, which made him obese. He had very few friends his age, and mainly played with his mother and 2 sisters. At age 11, while playing, he accidentally fell, resulting in a severe head injury. Although it didn't seem dangerous at first, Gacy had actually suffered internal injuries. It wasn't until he was 16, the blood clot in his brain from the injury was diagnosed. A year later, he was also diagnosed with a heart condition. However, physical pain couldn't defeat Gacy. At 18, he began to get involved in politics, becoming an assistant to a local Democratic Party representative. In 1963, at 21, Gacy graduated from Northwestern Business College, formerly the Northwestern School of Commerce, a college located in Bridgeview, Illinois. After that, he worked as a management trainee at a shoe company. After just 1 year, Gacy was promoted to department manager. In September of that year, he married his coworker, Marlon Myers. Marlon's father was a wealthy man who bought the newlyweds 3 KFC fast food restaurants in Waterloo. After moving there to live, John and Marlon had a son and a daughter. However, their marital relationship quickly deteriorated. Their marriage only lasted 5 years. After the divorce, custody of the children and assets like the house went to Marlon. 2 years later, at 29, Gacy returned to his hometown of Chicago and found a job as a cook at a local restaurant. With his mother's help, he bought a house on West Somerdale Avenue in the Norwood Park Township. In August of the same year, Gacy and his mother moved into the newly purchased house. Not long after, Gacy rekindled a romance with Carol, his high school girlfriend. Gacy always harbored a desire to provide himself and his loved ones with a luxurious life. He established a construction company called PDM, which stood for painting, decorating, and maintenance. During the day, Gacy worked as a cook at the restaurant, and in the evenings, he devoted time to his construction company. A year after rekindling their relationship, Gacy and Carol got married. Carol had also been through a failed marriage before. She brought her 2 daughters to live with Gacy. To avoid affecting the newlyweds' life, Gacy's mother voluntarily moved out before the wedding. A year after getting married, Gacy decided to quit his job as a cook to focus entirely on his business. Initially, Gacy's company didn't have many clients and only took on small repair jobs. However, the business gradually expanded into interior design, decoration, and landscape design. The company grew rapidly, and Gacy often had to work more than 16 hours a day. He was frequently busy until late at night before coming home, leaving no time to care for his children or nurture his marital relationship. By the 5th year of their marriage, when Gacy turned 34, his marriage to Carol came to an end. They officially divorced in March of that year. Although unlucky in love, everything else in Gacy's life seemed to be going very well. In the eyes of his neighbors, Gacy was a kind and enthusiastic person. He even helped clear snow from the streets after heavy snowfall. From 1974 to 1978, Gacy regularly hosted summer parties that attracted over 400 participants, including some political figures. Gacy actively participated in local Democratic Party political activities. Thanks to his good reputation in the community, he was elected as a precinct captain. On May 6, 1978, Gacy was even invited to meet and take a photo with the then First Lady of the United States, Rosalynn Carter. However, it seemed that Gacy always wore a mysterious mask. No one could truly see through his persona until one day when Gacy's true face was finally exposed. Who was Gacy really? What horrific crimes had he committed? To understand more about John Wayne Gacy, let's turn back time to December 11, 1978. On Monday, December 11, 1978, Chicago was in the midst of winter. The weather was freezing and snow was falling heavily. That evening, in Des Plaines, northwest of Chicago, a woman called the police to report that her son was missing. According to initial information, the woman's son, named Robert Peist, was 15 years old and worked part-time at Nissen Pharmacy near their home. That day was Robert's birthday. His mother had driven to the pharmacy to pick up her son from work and take him home to celebrate his birthday. When he met his mother, Robert said he couldn't go home right away. The reason was that a construction contractor had come to the pharmacy looking for him, wanting to hire him for an urgent job with double the pay compared to working at the pharmacy. Robert wanted to meet with the construction contractor to discuss the job specifics after finishing work, before going home to celebrate his birthday with his mother. Robert's mother went home and waited until 11 p.m., but her son was nowhere to be seen. Robert hadn't called home either. Worried about her son's safety, she decided to call the police for help in searching. After receiving the report, the police immediately began investigating. They went to the pharmacy manager, who said Robert had left the pharmacy at 9 p.m. Before that, a construction contractor named John Wayne Gacy had come to the pharmacy to offer work. The police immediately focused their investigation on this construction contractor. Police learned that Gacy lived in Norwood Park, east of Des Plaines, and was quite well known in the area. Additionally, Gacy was a member of a clown club. He often dressed up as a clown to give out gifts and perform for children in the community. People in the neighborhood loved Gacy's clown image. However, according to investigations, Gacy had been convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison for sodomy in Waterloo, Iowa, in the 4th year of his first marriage to Marlin. He was also suspected of assaulting 2 teenage boys and molesting several other young boys. It was during this time that Marlin, Gacy's first wife, filed for divorce. Gacy's preference for men had manifested very early, but his first wife was unaware of it. Gacy had hired many teenagers to work for his KFC fast food restaurants. He even set up a club in the basement, private area for employees to drink alcohol and play billiards before molesting these teenagers. Gacy would usually get them drunk. If the victim resisted, he would claim he was just joking around. During his time in Iowa State Prison, Gacy was considered a model prisoner. Just a few months after entering prison, Gacy was promoted to head chef. He also actively participated in some programs to improve living conditions for inmates. Thanks to his good behavior, Gacy was paroled after serving only 18 months. He then returned to Chicago. After marrying his second wife, Carol, Gacy often brought strange young men home. Carol asked him about this, and when things could no longer be hidden, Gacy had to admit to Carol that he was homosexual. They then separated and finally divorced. Time passed to the evening of the next day, 24 hours after Robert went missing. 2 police officers called Gacy's house. Gacy, then 36 years old, told the police that he had been to the pharmacy that day, but there were 2 employees in the store, and he didn't know who Robert was. Gacy insisted that he hadn't offered Robert a job. He said he went to the pharmacy just to ask if there was a need for renovation. When the police asked Gacy to come to the station for questioning, Gacy made an excuse that his uncle had just passed away, so it wasn't convenient for him to travel, promising to come to the police station a bit later. At 3:20 a.m. the next morning, Gacy appeared at the police station covered in mud. The running boards of the car he was driving were also covered in mud. Gacy said he had just been in a car accident. Police later confirmed this was true. Faced with police questions, Gacy steadfastly denied any involvement in Robert's disappearance. He insisted that he hadn't offered Robert a job. However, when asked why he returned to the pharmacy at 8 p.m. that day, Gacy said the pharmacy manager had called him, saying he had left his notebook at the pharmacy. The police asked Gacy to write a detailed report of his activities on that evening. While interrogating Gacy, the search warrant for Gacy's house that the police had applied for was finally approved. They immediately went to Gacy's house on West Somerdale Avenue. At Gacy's house, the police found many suspicious items. There were some police badges and a pistol stored in a drawer. In the bathroom, they found syringes, handcuffs, and some books on homosexuality. In the bathroom closet, they found some men's clothes that were not Gacy's size. In the northwest bedroom, investigators found a bottle of illegal drugs, some driver's licenses, and a 1975 high school class ring engraved with the initials JAS. In the trash can in the room, they found a receipt from Nissan Pharmacy and a 3-foot-long nylon cord placed next to it. Police decided to impound Gacy's Oldsmobile and all the vehicles of his PDM construction company. They also assigned 2 teams of 2 people each to take turns monitoring Gacy 24/7 to look for more clues. On Wednesday, after Robert went missing, investigators received a call from a witness. This person reported that a year ago, a man named Gregory Godzik had disappeared. Earlier that year, another employee of Gacy's, named John Butkovich, had drowned in a river in Illinois. Caller believed that the deaths of these 2 people were related to Gacy. The next day, the police investigated further based on the information provided by the witness and learned that a man named Jeffrey Rignall had reported that Gacy had lured him into his car, then sexually assaulted and beat him in the car. After satisfying his desires, Gacy had abandoned Jeffrey in Lincoln Park. It wasn't until the next day that Jeffrey was found by the police. Despite being monitored 24/7, Gacy remained very calm. He even frequently invited the surveillance officers to eat at restaurants, drink at bars, or come into his house. Additionally, Gacy constantly denied any involvement in Robert's disappearance. He accused the police of harassing him for political reasons. Sometimes, to escape police surveillance, Gacy would disregard traffic laws to shake off his followers. Another Oldsmobile of Gacy's had been sold to a man named David Cram, an employee of Gacy's. Cram had started working for PDM in May of the previous year and lived with Gacy until October of the following year. After getting Cram's permission, police examined the car. They found some fibers suspected to be human hair in the trunk. However, due to the underdeveloped DNA technology at the time, these hairs couldn't provide any additional information. Then the police brought in 3 professionally trained dogs. One of them entered the car, went to the front seat, and lay down on the passenger seat. This was a characteristic reaction indicating that someone had died in the car. In other words, the dog was suggesting that Robert had sat in this car. On the morning of the 8th day since Robert went missing, Gacy once again invited the officers monitoring him to have breakfast at a restaurant. This time, Gacy seemed very worried and tired. Here, Gacy talked with the investigators about his business, marriage, and even about how he dressed up as a clown. At one point in the conversation, Gacy suddenly blurted out, "You know, clowns can get away with murder." That afternoon, Gacy drove to his lawyer's office to file a lawsuit against the Des Plaines Police Department, demanding they stop the surveillance and pay $750,000 in damages, about $18 billion in current exchange rates. On the same day, based on the Nissan Pharmacy receipt found at Gacy's house, police went to see Kim Byers, Robert's co-worker at the pharmacy. Kim told the police that on that day, he was wearing a jacket, and that receipt was in the pocket. When he learned that Robert wanted to leave the pharmacy to meet the construction contractor, he had taken off his jacket for Robert to wear. This proved that Robert had been with Gacy, contradicting Gacy's previous statement to the police. David Cram, a man who had bought the Oldsmobile from Gacy, said that last summer, at Gacy's request, he had poured a large amount of lime into the crawl space under Gacy's house floor. Hearing this, the police felt something was suspicious, because in their previous search, they hadn't discovered any crawl space under the house floor. police immediately applied for a second search warrant. Meanwhile, Gacy's lawyer had filed a civil lawsuit against the Des Plaines Police Department. The hearing was scheduled to take place in 3 days. However, that afternoon, Gacy invited 2 investigators into his house to gather more clues. One investigator deliberately engaged Gacy in conversation to distract his attention while the other investigator sneaked into Gacy's bedroom. In the bedroom, he saw a Motorola TV and suspected it belonged to a missing person named John Sick. While the investigator was trying to record the TV's serial number, Gacy outside the door discovered him. The investigator immediately pretended to go to the bathroom to throw Gacy off. While flushing the toilet, the investigator smelled a strong, foul odor. He suspected the smell was coming from the heating ducts. However, during the previous search, no one had noticed this detail, perhaps because the heating system in the house hadn't been turned on at that time. The next day, the police continued to interrogate Cram. When asked where Gacy might have hidden Robert's body, Cram said it could be hidden in the crawl space under the house floor. Then Cram was taken for a lie detector test, but he failed it. Cram still insisted that there were bodies buried in the crawl space under Gacy's house floor. The police also went to a man named Michael Rossi. Rossi said that Gacy had tried to molest him 2 years ago. At that time, Rossi had gone to Gacy's house and saw mud stains on the carpet. Immediately, Gacy's face became tense. Then Gacy quickly grabbed a flashlight and quickly lifted a floor panel, crawling into the crawl space below. When asked by the police if he had ever been down there, Rossi said Gacy had asked him to help spread lime down there. Additionally, Rossi helped Gacy dig some trenches that were 2 feet wide, 6 feet long, and 2 feet deep, equivalent to the size of a grave. However, Gacy explained that these were drainage trenches. Under intense police surveillance, Gacy probably realized that arrest was inevitable. That day, Gacy visited some friends and hugged them goodbye. In his drunken state, Gacy confessed to his friends that he had buried the bodies of most of his victims in the crawl space under his house floor and thrown 5 bodies into the Des Plaines River. Due to excessive drinking, Gacy quickly fell asleep. The next day, after waking up, Gacy refused to meet with the psychiatrist that his friends had arranged for him. Then he drove to another friend's house, hugged that friend tightly, and burst into tears, saying he had killed 30 people. That was Gacy's last day of freedom. That morning, police had obtained information about Gacy's confession to his friends. Concerned about Gacy's unusual behavior, the police decided to arrest him immediately. When the police informed Gacy that they would search for Robert's body in the crawl space under his house floor, Gacy denied that the boy had been buried there. Then the police went to Gacy's house with a search warrant. When they arrived, they discovered that Gacy had removed the sump pump, causing water to flood the entire crawl space. Certainly, I'll continue the translation. After using pumps to remove the water, they began digging. Within just a few minutes, they found a partially decomposed body and some human hair. Due to the severe decomposition of the body, the police determined this was not Robert. Continuing to dig, the investigators found the skulls of 8 other victims next to the second body. A day after being arrested, Gacy confessed to the police that he had killed about 30 young men. He said that most of these were runaways or male prostitutes he had found at bus stations or on the streets of Chicago. Gacy would use various excuses to lure them into his car, such as offering them work with generous pay or pretending to make friends. Once discovered lying, he would use force to subdue and kidnap. Gacy would handcuff or tie up the victims to control them, then sexually assault and torture them. Gacy called these sick actions handcuff tricks. Finally, he would use a rope to strangle the victims to death. When asked why he did this, Gacy said he was inspired by the Houston mass murders. The Houston mass murders occurred in the late 1960s and early 1970s, when 3 men killed at least 28 people. Gacy usually lured victims to his private home one by one, but there were cases where he killed 2 people at the same time. Gacy said that killing brought him a sense of pleasure. It took the police a week to excavate Gacy's house. What shocked people was that they found a total of 29 skeletons in the house. 26 skeletons were found in the crawl space under the bedroom, living room, kitchen, and bathroom. Another skeleton was found in the crawl space under the garage. In addition, police found 3 more bodies in a river in Des Plaines. After burying the victims' bodies in the crawl space, Gacy often sprinkled lime to speed up the decomposition process. He himself couldn't remember how many bodies he had buried under his house. When asked about Robert's whereabouts, Gacy confessed to killing the boy. He said that after disposing of Robert's body, he hurriedly went to Des Plaines for an appointment and had a traffic accident on the way. That's why Gacy appeared at the police station with a dirty appearance in the early morning of the next day. Due to an unexpected snowstorm in Chicago, with some areas covered in snow up to 29 inches deep, the excavation of bodies under Gacy's house was temporarily halted. On March 9th, the 28th body was found in a pit near the barbecue grill in the backyard. The body was wrapped in several plastic bags. 7 days later, the 29th body was found under the dining room floor. Later, forensic experts used biological techniques to identify 32 victims. Among them, 3 bodies were found in boxes in Des Plaines. The youngest identified victim was 14 years old, and the oldest was 21. The identities of 5 other victims remain unknown to this day. It is speculated that they were between 14 and 30 years old. A month later, a man called the police to report that he had seen a severely decomposed body at the base of a tree while walking along the Des Plaines River. That evening, forensic experts confirmed that this body was Robert, who had gone missing earlier. The autopsy results showed that 3 cloth gags were tightly stuffed in Robert's throat, causing him to die of suffocation. What Gacy had experienced in his childhood had severely altered his psychology. Gacy's father was a heavy alcoholic who often abused his wife and children, so the relationship between Gacy and his father was very poor. When Gacy was 6 years old, he accidentally messed up the car engine parts his father was assembling, and his father punished him with a belt. At that time, Gacy's mother tried to protect her son, but was scolded by her husband. He called Gacy a sissy and a mama's boy. When Gacy was 7 years old, he and another boy had sexually molested a little girl. Gacy continued to be punished by his father. That same year, Gacy was molested by a friend of his father's in a truck. Fearing being scolded, Gacy didn't dare to tell his father about this incident. A high school friend of Gacy's said that Gacy's father often ridiculed and attacked Gacy for no reason. Once, when visiting Gacy's house, this friend witnessed Gacy's father coming out of the basement in a drunken state, then cursing and hitting Gacy. Gacy never fought back against his father's action. Gacy's first job was at a mortuary. One night, while alone in the mortuary, out of curiosity, Gacy climbed into the coffin of a deceased young man. Gacy hugged and caressed the man's body. This gave him a strange feeling. In his second marriage, Gacy spent his free time learning about a fun clown club. The members of this club often dressed up as clowns and performed at various events. After joining the clown club, Gacy created a clown character named Pogo, and it was because of this that he used the clown image to lure boys to satisfy his desires. Gacy would make up all sorts of reasons to lure victims to his home, then show them movies and force them into bed. If the victims didn't comply, he would punish them. Gacy's first crime was committed 7 years ago, during his first marriage. According to Gacy's confession, one afternoon, he was driving alone to the Loop in Chicago to see an ice sculpture exhibition when he saw a handsome young man at a bus stop. Attracted by the young man's appearance, Gacy actively approached and struck up a conversation. The young man's name was Timothy, and he was 16 years old. Gacy was very good at starting conversations and making acquaintances, and they chatted very pleasantly. Gacy drove Timothy around Chicago, and when it got dark, Gacy invited Timothy to stay at his house, and Timothy agreed. The next morning, when Gacy woke up, he saw Timothy standing at the bedroom door, holding a kitchen knife. Gacy panicked, jumped out of bed, and rushed to grab the knife from Timothy's hand. Startled by Gacy, Timothy instinctively raised his hand, accidentally scratching Gacy's arm. This made Gacy believe even more that the young man intended to attack him. Gacy forcefully grabbed the knife from Timothy's hand, then grabbed his head and slammed it against the wall. While struggling, Timothy kicked Gacy in the stomach. Gacy became even angrier. He grabbed Timothy's collar and yelled, "You fucking bitch, I'll kill you." Then Gacy threw Timothy to the floor, sat on top of him, and repeatedly stabbed him in the chest with the knife. When Timothy stopped resisting, Gacy stood up, went to the bathroom to clean the knife, then walked towards the kitchen. It was then that he saw breakfast had been prepared on the dining table. It turned out that Timothy had woken up early to prepare breakfast and was about to wake Gacy up to eat. Gacy knew he had committed a terrible crime, but it was too late for regret. He buried Timothy's body in the crawl space under the house floor, then poured concrete over it to conceal the crime. This first experience of killing awakened the demon inside Gacy. From then on, he committed 32 more murders until he was caught. Even when arrested, Gacy showed no remorse. Speaking about his first crime, Gacy said he experienced a paralyzing ecstasy. He believed that death was the ultimate pleasure. In February 1980, the trial for the Gacy case began at the Cook County Courthouse. After a month of trial, the court delivered its verdict. The defendant, John Wayne Gacy, was found guilty of 33 counts of murder, as well as charges of sexual assault and child abuse. Gacy was sentenced to death. Gacy did not accept the verdict and appealed. In mid-1984, Illinois Supreme Court upheld the verdict. In the following years, Gacy's lawyers appealed several times until October 1993, when the Supreme Court rejected the final appeal. On the evening of May 9, 1994, Gacy, then 52 years old, was allowed to have his last dinner with his family in prison. He chose KFC chicken. Early the next morning, witnessed by a Catholic priest, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection. According to reports, Gacy had been diagnosed with a mental disorder before his execution. He showed no remorse for the crimes he had committed. Even in his last words before execution, Gacy only said that killing him would not compensate for the losses of others. He even taunted, saying, "Kiss my ass before dying." The killer clown, John Wayne Gacy, finally paid the price for his horrific crimes. However, the pain of the victims' families remains, as 5 sets of remains still haven't been identified. Perhaps somewhere, they are still waiting for the day their loved ones return. The police continue to effort to identify them, using the most advanced DNA technology, hoping that one day they can give names back to the unfortunate victims and bring closure to their families. The story of John Wayne Gacy became one of the most shocking serial murder cases in American history. It exposed the dark side of human nature and served as a warning about society's indifference to abnormal signs, which ultimately cost the lives of innocent people. Even as time passes, the case of the killer clown will forever remain a costly lesson, a plea for a more compassionate society where people care for, share with, and protect each other, so that tragedies like this never happen again. Today's video ends here, and I'll see you in the next videos. Goodbye.